In what situations would you want better than a quarter MOA?
All the time.
What's quarter MOA worth around here?
According to who needs it. Hey, we're here today at Gradous Rifles. We're going to talk about this 6 dasher we're doing. We did not originally build this gun, but I think we can make it a little better by the things that we think are important. It has some spacing issues on the pillars. There were no pillars in the stock. The release agent they used was very, very thick, and that can be problematic. Under ignition, it's going to move in that stock before the bullet exits the barrel. And this is just a kind of a first segment of the things we're going to use and stuff we're going to look for. These are some pillars we made in-house. They're not finished, they're not tapered. We also make these screws in-house, and they all have to be cut to length. On a trigger guard, you can turn that trigger guard either direction. It doesn't matter. If you need more clearance to the rear or you need more clearance to the front, it's perfectly fine to flip it into stock to get your trigger oriented where you would want it comfortable for the hand or to clear the trigger guard. So what we're going to do now is we're going to install the trigger loosely and kind of see which way our trigger guard's got to be. So we're going to drop this in here. We're going to stick our stock back on. We're going to line up a recoil lug. We're going to take our guard and drop it in a normal position, which will be large hole to the back. We're going to look inside the trigger guard and make sure that we got clearance for the trigger to fire, and it appears that we do, but if your trigger was further forward, there's nothing wrong with flipping this guard around to achieve more clearance in that direction. When we got this gun, like I said, it had been skim bedded. I don't know if DL can zoom in, but you can see the finger swipes in the bedding. Where the release agent was too thick. And what that causes is the gun to move around before the bullet can exit the barrel. And the pillars that were in it really weren't pillars, they were scutcheons. So we cut them all the way through. We cut the recoil lug. The action was a little too far back. This is not our inletting that's in this stock other than the pillar holes and the recoil lug cut. So to go from here, we're going to start prepping all this. We're going to cut this bedding out. We're going to cut the barrel pad out. I don't believe in barrel pads. Anytime there's pressure on the forearm of the stock, it's going to exert pressure on the pad. You're going to have a point of shift of impact, but just based off the stock flex alone. We're going to install 3 machine pillars. We're going to cut our screws to length in the next episode. Okay, while bedding a rifle, we don't believe in barrel pads over at Gradous Rifles, so make sure that you consider that, if you're bedding guns. So we're going to cut this barrel pad completely out right now. Hey y'all, we're going to talk about opening this barrel channel up for a larger barrel. You don't really want straight sides. You want to have a radius. In other words, on the edge of this stock, you wouldn't want this side straight down because your reveal would not be pretty. So what I'm doing, I'm scraping some dips and dives out of the bottom of the stock. And if you notice, I only come up maybe 2/3 the side of the stock when I'm scraping. And I'm just scraping a few thousandths at a time. And I'm gonna blend all this back together once I get this scraping done, and I'll get DL to restart that camera. So what we're doing is we're trying to get enough clearance on this barrel. And you can use a machine to do this. You can use an end mill. You can take a ball mill and the milling machine and cut it much faster. But for me, I just feel good doing this. I enjoy it. It's hard, monotonous work, but it kind of calms me and gives me time to think before I make a 90-mile-an-hour mistake. Now, okay, we kind of got it paddle scraped out to a rough inlet. It's very choppy and uneven. Everything on it's uneven. If you notice, we cut to this height, so we got to increase depth, but we got to increase the radius. And what I do is take a wood dowel, 100 grit paper. I'm gonna start in the bottom, getting the bottom of the stock back smooth. And if you notice, it comes smooth pretty quick, and you have to keep rotating your dial because the radius that's in the stock is bigger than the radius you're sanding with. So once you get down through here, and there's different materials, this is a heavier fill, it's gonna sand a little slower. If you notice the lighter fill is actually already sanding a little lower because it cuts faster. So we're gonna kind of level that up now best we can. Once I get the bottom of this stock, you know, looking decent and the radius back in it and all the grooves out of it, then I'm gonna walk up the sides of it into the top radius where the barrel blends in. And you can see we scrape to here. You'll see a different color, there's a ledge. Now I'm gonna take this dial and I'm gonna roll it up under that edge. Now I'm gonna put my radius back in. And you'll see all that blend back together. If you watch here in the next several seconds, you'll see that radius without those flat spots reappear. And you'll start getting nice looking work and nice cuts. And again, the reason we do this, when you look around that barrel, you want the stock to follow it. You don't want to have it straight sided. Like, you know, the barrel we put back in this, we did barrel this gun. We did not do the stock work, but we took the stock work on. And the barrel we used was a few thousandths bigger. So we're gonna open this up. You can see that the pad is now removed in front of the recoil lug. As soon as we get all this, you know, where we want it, then we'll go into removing the old bedding and getting spacing. Then I'll completely mock the gun together. I'll put the trigger in, I'll put the action together, I'll check my bolt handle cut, I'm gonna get my pillar depth correct, I'm gonna get all our spacings correct. We're not gonna have any bolts on a bind. You don't want a bolt touching a pillar on the ID of the pillar. You don't want anything in the bind. It needs to be very happy. So right now we're just working on the barrel channel. Hey, we got a lot of old bedding in the stock. And you know, the biggest thing, you're gonna tighten 2 screws, so you can't have a high spot in between the 2 screws or you're gonna bend, flex to action and cause stress. So I'm gonna very crudely grind it out with a carbide end mill that we enjoy using, and take out what we can and with the end mill, and the rest of it I'm gonna sand, and then eventually I'll lay a mandrel in it to take all the high spots out. So here we go. Bear with me. Anytime you bed a gun, you do not want a high spot in between your contact points. On the pillar holes, I tend to radius them or make them funnel shaped on the inside. That way when you're sliding the stock over the pillars, you don't get a hesitation. The stock doesn't buck or get air trapped under it. So while you're here, you know, at least put a little chamfer on the biggest pillar holes. That way you get some guidance into the position. That lug, just like that. I'm going to take the sides of the lug. You can use 1 or 2 layers of tape. It doesn't matter. It's up to you and up to your ability to remove it out of there. A lot of people leave it on. I don't. It's too thick.